So Xbox shut down 4 studios yesterday. I want to talk about it. I want to go over what got shut down, why I think it happened, even though we'll never probably get really good answers to why. Um, I want to talk about some of the reaction to this and kind of how I think things are going to go moving forward. Um, Before I get into this video, I'm probably going to say things or take stances that are going to seem like I'm taking Xbox's side or apologizing. I'm not. You shouldn't trust corporations. They are just giant money making monsters that will bowl through flesh and humanity to make as much money as they can, no matter the cost. And you shouldn't trust the corporation, aka you should never have loyalty to really any brand, but especially in the gaming sense. The console wars. You should never be loyal to a plastic box, to a specific publisher, because none of them care about you, and they care very little about the people who actually make the money. So I want to put that out there because what I would like to do is to give some perspective, or at least some of my thoughts, and give a little more conversation and nuance to what's going on in a situation where most of the reaction, even by people who are fairly well respected in the gaming sphere, journalists and content creators and influencers, are kind of just doing the, like, in my opinion, kind of lazy, "Rah, how could they do this" thing, instead of talking about why they probably did it and how that still doesn't feel good as a consumer, as a gamer, as a regular person, and it doesn't excuse the actions they're taking. But to not pretend like this isn't part of a bigger thing that's been happening for a while, and it's kind of been happening forever. So, first, let's get into what actually happened and talk about that a little bit. Okay, so it started on Monday morning or Tuesday morning, May 7th at 9:22 a.m. Jason Schreier puts out this tweet that says, "Breaking: Xbox is shutting down Arcane Austin, Tango Gameworks, and two other studios." Story hitting Bloomberg shortly. And then shortly after that, followed up with the tweet: "The other shuttered subsidiaries are Alpha Dog Studios and Roundhouse Games," specifying that Roundhouse would be getting merged into ZeniMax Online Studios. After that, there were tweets put out by Tango Gameworks saying, today it was announced that Tango Gameworks will close. Thank you to everyone that explored the worlds we created. Hi-Fi Rush, along with Tango's previous titles, will remain available and playable everywhere they are today. And then the Arcane black box tweet came saying, today it was announced that Arcane Austin will close and development will not continue on Redfall. To everyone that has supported the work from our Austin studio over the years, thank you. Thank you for spending time with our worlds and making them your own. Arcane Leon will continue their focus on immersive experiences, where they are hard at work on their upcoming project. I believe that is Blade, the Marvel game. Redfall players who purchased the Hero Pass as part of the Premium Bite Back Edition or Premium Bite Back Upgrade will be eligible to receive the value of the upgrade. While there will be no further updates, Redfall servers will remain online for players to enjoy. So there's just no getting around it. This sucks, right? This is awful. We don't like seeing layoffs. We really don't like seeing studios getting shut down. We really don't like seeing it happen after consolidation, after there's all of these hopes and promises, and maybe not promises or guarantees, but reassurances that when you do acquisitions, when you do this stuff, that things like this won't happen. Or at least that's the goal, right? And so you see this happen and it sucks. I do think it's worth digging into a little bit more when we talk about the studios that are being shut down. So for the two studios that were a little less known, Alpha Dog Studios, I believe, is was a mobile studio, and I don't. I think it's interesting that they would get shut down, because they have such a focus on mobile now, especially after ABK getting Activision Blizzard King, which is one of the biggest mobile studios and studios in the world. You would think that something like Alpha Dog would be useful, but apparently not. Right, the only game I could see they currently had out was a mobile Doom game, which was like a top-down kind of thing. And then Roundhouse Studios, as far as I can tell, and I may have these switched, but I believe they were a support studio for Redfall, and they're the one getting merged into ZeniMax. And so, you know, that doesn't seem all that crazy to me, especially if everyone's getting merged into ZeniMax and they aren't gonna cut people and then merge who's left. That one seems less serious. Then we get to the bigger situation here, where Tango Gameworks, who just put out Hi-Fi Rush a year ago, and previously had Ghostwire Tokyo, and the Evil Dead games, or the horror games that they had before that. That one seems weird, right? Because Hi-Fi Rush was a big hit. It won awards, or at least it got nominated for them. It was a big hit last year. It's come to PlayStation. I think it's come into Switch as well, or it was. I don't know if this impacts that. And there were people who were hoping for a sequel and more from that world. And I love that game. Hi-Fi Rush was a great surprise. And I've seen people kind of doing the whole like, if the Hi-Fi Rush studio can get shut down, who's safe? And there's two answers to that. I think it's no one's safe. Any studio under any publisher right now, maybe besides Nintendo. Nintendo seems a little more stable than literally everyone else, but no one's safe. Like we have to be so clear about that. Obviously, the focus is on Xbox right now. I think Xbox gets a little extra focus on everything that happens with them for reasons. I won't try to conspiracy theorize, but no one's safe. No PlayStation studio is safe. No Xbox studio is safe. No Ubisoft studio is safe. No EA studio is safe. No Embracer studio is safe. None of these studios are safe. None of them. And they haven't been really ever, but especially in the last couple of years. It's just the state of not only the game industry, but the tech industry as a whole, and really just big industry in general. This is happening across the board, and it's not an excuse, and it's not okay. And I'm not saying that we should just get used to it and accept it. I'm just saying that we have to stop pretending like this is a surprise every time, because it's not. It just isn't. But we'll get to more of that conversation. With Tango, though, I think is interesting, and the angle I've not seen many people talk about is to realize that Mikami is the guy who started that studio years ago, and actually planned to leave years ago, and only did more recently for acquisition reasons, I assume. But I believe he's the creator of Resident Evil, as well as some other pretty substantial franchises. He did the Evil Dead, or whatever the games are called, with Tango early, and then they did Ghostwire Tokyo, which was not, from what I remember, not reviewed very well, but it did okay. I think people generally liked it. And then Hi-Fi Rush was this big surprise from them, right? Because they did horror games, and then they come out with this rhythm platforming beat 'em up game that was amazing. It was wild. But Mikami left after that. He founded the company. He was kind of the headliner of the company. I believe he was the creative lead there as well. And he's gone. And I think, at least my intuition or my gut tells me, that without Mikami, that studio did great work, and those devs don't deserve to lose their jobs. They obviously, we probably should have seen Xbox give them a chance to prove themselves. But my assumption is that without Mikami, Xbox maybe just in a cold-hearted business way, just didn't see the value in that studio anymore. And I don't like that. I don't agree with it. But I think that's one of those things where when you see people say things like, there's no excuse for shutting down Tango. And it's like, there's actually probably lots of excuses to shut them down. We may not agree with them as consumers or gamers, and they may be cold-hearted and ruthless, but there are reasons. Like, we can't, a big part of my issue, and I'll talk about it when I point out some tweets and stuff that I found, is that you kind of have to take the emotional side out of this a little bit if you want to analyze it from like a realistic kind of business point of view. It doesn't mean you have to agree with it. It doesn't mean you have to like it or feel like it's okay. But saying things, and I've seen some pretty prominent people in the game influencer, creator, journalist space being like, "Oh, I can't believe this happened." Like, really, you can't believe it? I can. I still think it sucks. And then with Arcane, like that's such a tough one because this is the studio who did, I believe, like Dishonored, who did Prey, and then most recently did Redfall, which wasn't great. It was also probably the result of, I believe, that studio had quite an exodus after acquisition. It wasn't quite the studio it probably was before that made Prey and the other games. Obviously, Redfall was a pretty gigantic failure, it seems. Not to denigrate that work. I mean, those devs still worked really hard on that game, and I'm sure they were proud of it, or at least in the things they did for it. But the thing to keep in mind with them is that, Redfall was obviously a failure. Prey is a cult classic, by some people considered one of the best games ever made. And it was a failure. As far as I know, as far as I remember, from a sales point of view, it didn't do well. It may have done, I don't, maybe failure is the wrong word, but it wasn't a big hit. It just wasn't. And again, you take off the gamer feels, you take off the consumer feels, you take off the respecting human decency feels, and you get to that corporate monster point of view. They this move probably shouldn't be as surprising as it seems to be for some people. It sucks. It's awful. The head of the Leon studio, who is still around, that studio in theory is going to be fine. Teed off and wrote this big thread on Twitter, ripping this whole situation apart, which is great. That's really good for them. I saw some people commentating that that's the kind of thing that tends to get people fired. That would be a pretty terrible move by Xbox at this time, though it very well may lead to that person leaving on their own anyways, because they seem pretty upset about it, and they had every right to be. I just, that's what's happened, and that's kind of my takes on the individual situations. What I kind of want to talk about now is all the reactions, and for better or worse, I have my own issues with how Xbox is doing this stuff. To a point, from a business point of view, I try to understand why they're doing these things, even if I personally don't agree with them. I also have my gamer takes and my personal takes, and how bummed I am that we aren't going to see a Hi-Fi Rush 2 and things like that. But I think the reaction is really the thing I have more commentary on, because like I kind of said before, there were a lot of people of influence in the industry who, after this situation and after a lot of these things happen, kind of act like they've just never been around the industry before, and they kind of react in a way, and they're like, oh, there was a layoff. I simply can't believe it. Right after we had the situation with PlayStation, where they behaved in one of the most anti-consumer ways I've ever seen with Helldivers 2, and they had their own layoffs and studio closures in the past months and a couple years, as well as EA and Ubisoft, and God, the Embracer Group. You could do a whole series of videos just on them. But still, it's so strange to me how you'll see some of these doomerist attitudes and these overreactions from people who have a lot of influence, and really, I get they're getting their clicks, they're getting their attention, they're patting themselves on the back for being so outraged over a thing, but really should be more responsible, in my opinion, and more just I don't know. I don't really have the words for it, but they just I'm bummed that these people don't have more interesting takes, and instead they're just going to what I would argue are this kind of lazy take of just like, this is bad and I'm angry. Like, that's for all the gamers to do. But the first one I'll point out here is actually kind of the other way around, was Mike Ybarra, the former head was a Blizzard, I believe, and came out and said, I see a lot of shots taken at Phil Spencer over today's Xbox announcements. I get it, but knowing him as a human, I know this hurts him as much as anyone else. This tweet sucks, right? I actually think the intent of the tweet is fine. I think Mike, I assume, knows Phil really well and is in the same position or was at one point, and knows that it's not like Phil Spencer's at home popping champagne and excited about all this stuff. The problem here was the timing, probably more than anything, and not maybe mentioning the people who lost their jobs first. But the reaction to this was hilarious. Was people straight up calling him out and saying like, "This is a bad take," like, and it's not a bad take. It's a reasonable take. He mentioned the people who lost their jobs later. He even says he doesn't defend the decisions and all of that. But even just the reaction to this tweet was so funny because you don't have to agree with him here. But there were people basically shouting him down, feeling like he's not allowed to have this opinion. And that was kind of the start of it for me, some of the frustration. Then we had here Roger Picorni of Kind of Funny posted, of course, Kotaku jumped on this story that the Arcane Austin devs were working on an offline mode for Redfall that was going to come out this month, and that's not going to come out now. So one day when the server shut down for Redfall, it's going to be done. And this person put another game lost to time when they inevitably close the servers within the year. Effing criminal. I mean, where was this energy when Redfall was like, no one likes Redfall. Like, I'm sure there's people who do. I'm sure there's an audience who actually does enjoy it. No offense to you, but no one does. No one likes this game. It's been, dragged over Xbox ever since it came out. It's been ripped apart. It's been torn down. It's not a very good game. I've tried to play it multiple times, even after some of the more recent updates where they tried to kind of fix it. It's just not a very good game. It doesn't feel good to play. It doesn't look very good. In my opinion, it's just kind of a generally bad game. And Roger, and we even had a little exchange. He's basically just talking about game preservation, which is totally fine, and I get it. But this is one example I had of like, people are going to turn anything, even the game that no one likes, into like a sob story to go after Xbox, or in theory, any publisher that makes these kind of moves. And I don't think this cheapens the conversation of the things that really are going wrong here. We had Jess Gordon, who's always, especially recently, has been a big clickbaiter, talking about don't think the trust or faith in Xbox has been this low since 2013, the release of Xbox One. Digging themselves out of this hole would be Herculean. And this, I agree to a point, but I think there's the sentiment about Xbox that they've earned by the actions that they've made, good or bad, which I definitely don't think is as bad as 2013. The Xbox One was a disaster for Xbox, was probably what's the reason they're still struggling to this day to catch back up in any sense. I think a big problem we have is that a lot of gamers, especially enthusiasts, like anyone who's watching this video, myself, people like Jez who are in the industry, don't realize that they speak to such a small part of the gaming audience. There are a vast majority, I would be willing to bet, of folks who play games, who buy consoles, who buy games and play them maybe weekly, fairly often, who don't pay attention to any of this stuff. And so while the small pie slice of people who are always online and who are enthusiasts and paying attention to this stuff every day, listening to podcasts, watching videos, things like that, that crew is probably not feeling great right now for legitimate reasons, and I think for other reasons. I think sometimes everyone in this industry, especially the very connected people, kind of get these blinders on where they don't realize how much of the audience and how many of the people involved in this and the consumers in this industry are almost completely oblivious to the stuff, who won't ever know that these studios got shut down, probably never even heard of the studios before. And so I just wish there was a little more nuance with these conversations of realizing that maybe, the thousands of people who are, obsessed with this stuff every day, maybe don't represent a very big chunk of folks. This guy is an editor-in-chief for a tech website. He's been previously wrote for like Polygon and some more direct gaming websites, and said it's going to be so embarrassing when we find out that Xbox shut down all these studios to move resources to Fallout 5, which still ends up getting a rushed, buggy release on Xbox's next console 4 years down after the show ends. 10,000 likes on this tweet, a bunch of, hundreds of shares on it. And this guy is knowledgeable. This guy has been writing in the gaming world for a long time. And this, as far as I know, is not how it works. But tweets like this, and this sentiment and this pessimism and this negativity, just assuming the next Fallout's going to suck, assuming that they shut down these studios to make the next, it doesn't make any sense. That's not how these things work. If in fact, if this is what the plan was, it's way more likely that they would have absorbed all of these studios into Bethesda and created a new team at Bethesda, and everyone who was willing to come over and start working on a new team for a Fallout game, they would have absorbed them. As far as I can tell, as far as I can imagine, they wouldn't have just laid them all off and fired them all. And so you've got people like this, though, who have influence, 178,000 impressions and tons of comments, 51 at this time, and it was probably more by now. And so, like, this is the kind of stuff that I'm getting at, is that this guy, this should be a better conversation. This person, now, I looked up this guy's, on his current website, his article history. It's pretty self-explanatory why he would have this take. I'll let you look it up yourself if you want. This dude has a pretty hyper lean when it comes to the gaming industry. But that's fine. You're allowed to have biases. It's okay. But this tweet in particular is just false. It's almost 99% not true. Maybe this is what's happening, but this isn't how they would probably do it. And it's not like an RPG where they just took points away from those studios that they shut down, and they're just going to put points into Bethesda to make a new Fallout game. Like, that's not how these things work. And this was one of the most frustrating things I saw. This person, who's a pretty big Bethesda creator, did something similar. He said, "I'm very genuinely concerned about the future of Bethesda and Xbox studios. If Avowed doesn't sell well, what does that even matter? Or does it matter? What would happen to Obsidian, Ninja Theory, id Software, things like that? We're seeing incredible teams disintegrate before our eyes." Again, this is just this generalization and this kind of, applying one situation to all. These conversations, like, these should be more complicated than this. They shouldn't just be, well, they shut down these studios, so they're going to shut down all of them. I did say before that in theory, every studio is in danger, but none of these studios that are listed here have the same problem that Tango or Arcane had, where Obsidian is making like 4 games, and Grounded has been a huge success. Again, maybe that doesn't matter, but Grounded is big and it's getting pushed to other platforms. They have the upcoming Outer Worlds 2. They have other projects. They just had Pentiment, which was pretty exciting. Ninja Theory has Hellblade 2 just about to come out. Apparently, they're working on a couple other projects, and just their tech work in general is pretty big for Xbox. id Software, having their own Quake or Doom or whatever. We probably shouldn't generalize. This one here, but Microsoft laid off 9 to 12% earlier this year, talking about earlier layoffs that happened in the overall company. There's no valid reason for closing these studios or anything other than greed, part due to consolidation. It's just not true. It just isn't. There's no valid reasoning. Yes, there absolutely is. There is valid reasoning. There's certainly business reasoning behind Xbox shutting down these studios. I don't agree with it. I think it sucks from a gamer's point of view. I don't expect anyone who's watching this to agree with the moves. But just saying that there's no valid, like, putting that into your head, into other people's heads of, well, there's no valid reason to do this. And there absolutely is. We just don't like the reasoning. And that's fine for us, but it's probably not going to change how they do things. And once we get past that, once we stop acting like there's no valid reasons, that's when we can actually start talking about, what's really going on and really start criticizing these companies for the things they're doing. But we have to stop pretending like we're in some fantasy land where these things make no sense, because they do make sense. They just suck. And Destin, who's always in for the clickbait, doing the whole, after the studio closures, even today, after diehard Xbox fans are like, for that reason I'm out. Posting this cute little clickbaity thing. He's got a ton of impressions and responses to it. Again, he's talking about such a narrow band of people, especially people who follow him and who he follows. It's just, this only perpetuates an idea that may not be completely accurate. This was a response to someone else. They said, "This was my last straw. My trust for Phil Spencer and the rest of the Xbox leadership. Sure, it's not just their fault. Microsoft execs are even worse. I still think ABK wasn't really a good idea, but who am I to judge? 70 billion to close whole studios or departments. These things aren't connected. Like, again, this person who's, I believe, relatively well known in the influencer world, the 70 billion they spent on ABK wouldn't have saved these 4 studios. It's not how these things work. Different pots of money, different priorities. This is where the more complicated conversations have to happen. And then this thing at all saying, you know, it wasn't, you know, it wasn't worth it. It wasn't a good idea. If it wasn't for ABK, this last quarterly report for Xbox, which was really, really good for them from a revenue perspective, wouldn't have been very good. And it's exactly why they bought to Microsoft. I believe it was in, or bought ABK. I believe it was in this thread someone said something along the lines of, and maybe I have it here. I don't, but someone said something like, you know, Xbox is floundering and it's only still there because Microsoft is pumping money into it. And that's just not true. Microsoft's best division is Xbox from a profit point of view. Xbox is leading their company. They're a $3 trillion company. They're not doing it with console sales, obviously, and it's a big part on the back of ABK and that acquisition, but that's why they acquired them. And so when we can start talking about the realities of all of this stuff, the things that are actually happening and the real reasons these things are happening, even if we don't like them, is when I think we can actually have useful conversations about what's going on, and to have just better perspectives on these things instead of these, what I think are basically these kind of console war-y, you know, biases and things like that, where people are just kind of coming up with their own conclusions and going from there. And then here is a creator who I don't trust to not be a weirdo if I put their name on here. But they say, it really feels like the end of an era for Microsoft. Like the grand experiment has failed, and now it's just Activision-style third-party publishing, IP farming, and cost-cutting. Like you're going to close Tango and then get up on stage and talk about how much great games matter to Xbox. And again, this person especially knows how this stuff works. They have a huge lean to Sony. And so this is a typical response from them for anything that Xbox does. But, you know, saying it's a failed experiment, again, talking about the financials, Xbox has not failed just because it's not doing as well as PlayStation, for instance. Saying it's a Activision style third party publisher because they put a couple games on PlayStation. Again, it's this exaggeration, this sensationalism that makes these conversations useless. IP farming, cost cutting, which every single publisher is doing, including the ones that this person prefers. And then you're going to close Tango without talking about the reasons that they may have done it. This sucks. You know, this is awful. But things like this are what lead the average gamer who maybe doesn't understand these things. You know, these people should be leading these people better, being better examples, at least in my opinion. So as I wrap up this video, that's way too long and probably no one's going to watch it. For what happens moving forward, that they're going to do their showcase next month, and they're going to show us a bunch of games that are on their way. Morale is probably not going to be great around the company, even though I don't think it is around the entire industry anyways. And we'll move on. And it sucks, and that's gross. But that's the way it is, and that's what's going to happen. A big part of my kind of grumpiness over the last 24 hours has been that as soon as this was announced, I put up some tweets on Twitter saying, like, everyone's going to pat themselves on their back for their outrage over this. And then in a week or a couple weeks, or at least in a month, when all these showcases start happening, it's going to be gone. It's going to be gone in a couple days. This conversation, for the most part, will be gone in a couple days. Either PlayStation's going to lay some people off, or another publisher's going to do it, or some other controversy is going to come up, or some other topic is going to take over the conversation. And this will just be another layoff that happened, another shutdown that happened. And it sucks. It's awful. Again, like I said at the beginning, I'm not defending these actions. I think they're awful. I think they suck. I wish they didn't happen. I wanted to see more from at least Tango Gameworks. But the conversation isn't as simple as just they're evil, greedy corporation. There's more to it than that. And dumbing the conversation down to a point like that just sucks. It doesn't help anything. It doesn't educate anyone. It doesn't make anyone consider the bigger picture of what's going on in the game industry, in the tech industry, and big corporate industries in general. And that, this is just happening, and it's probably going to keep happening for a couple of years. So buckle up. If you aren't used to it by now, I don't know what to tell you, because this is we're probably in the middle of it right now, which is awful. It's probably only going to get worse. You're going to see probably every major publisher, maybe besides Nintendo, shutting down probably more studios, probably acquiring more as well. So be prepared for those conversations. And my only plea as I wrap up this video is to not worry about the clickbait, to consider that even if something happens that you think is gross and scummy, because it is, at least consider the devil's advocate side. At least consider, like, man, why would they do that? Because I think that's really good for like an educated consumer's point of view, to at least consider why these things happen, and not like a bunch of these tweets I showed just to go off on the easy clickbait reaction, and kind of the dogpiling and stuff that comes with that. It's never that simple. And I just really encourage people to be more educated gamers than that. While that may be a big ask, I think it's reasonable. And that's what I have for this video. If you like these kinds of videos about games and game news and industry news and all of that, and like my takes on them, please consider subscribing to the channel. If you like this video, hit the like button so more people see it. Leave your comments down below. I'm more than happy to get your opinions and reactions to this, your takes as well. If you really want to support the content I have, consider becoming a YouTube member. I would really appreciate that. I do have a couple game podcasts, like the Bonfire podcast, which is a news weekly show, as well as the Mass Effect Hypecast, where I talk about the next game and that franchise that's hopefully coming. Go check those out either here on YouTube or on the podcast platforms. You can also check out the link in the description of this video for all of my socials, for all my other content, and for ways to support my channel other than memberships. That's all I have for this one. So until next time.